people, it's Multiplier and we're looking at my 5 favourite things about Serum today. And Serum is, without meaning to big it up in any kind of unusual, magical, mysterious way, it is the best synth I've ever used. I genuinely think it's going to replace Massive over the next few years as the main synth that everyone's going to be talking about, using and making awesome stuff with. So, thought I'd tell you my 5 favourite things, which are, some of them are pretty general ideas, general concepts, and some of them are quite specific features, but it just gives you a flavour of the sort of radness inside of Serum, and maybe you learn a few tips and tricks along the way, which is ideal. Standard multiplier video. There will be minimal Skrillex jokes, but lots of useful information. So let's get straight into it. Tip number 1 is going to be a specific one just for you Serum people that already have it. So it's all about how with these filters, you've got this pan thing here. And it's not that obvious unless you read the manual or leave your mouse over it, what's happening. So it says stereo spread, left to right, and here's the keyword, cutoff offset. What's basically happening is it's offsetting the cutoff position in the left and the right channel, which creates this super cool widening effect. Because you've got to bear in mind with all these filters, you've got like a main parameter cutoff. So we have a weird filter right now called all passes. It will vary the cutoff according to the pan position for the left and right channel. So the further you push the pan to the left or the right, the further the cutoff offset, or the difference between the two cutoffs between the left and the right channel. Super dope. So let's give you an example. Right now we have this pretty rad sound. Let's vary the pan. Pretty cool, right? It's varying the cutoff for the different left and right sides. Super dope. And if you want a really cool power user ting to muck about with, try automating that pan position, so the cutoff offset of the filter. You get some crazy stereo movement, because a lot of times creating natural organic stereo movement is tricky. So automating this pan position creates this crazy movement from left to right. Have an experiment. It's super dope and super rad. Check it out. The next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be more of a general thing I love about Serum, and that is all the visual feedback. So for example, with the wavetables here, we can see as it's moving through the wavetables. So if you check it out, we can see the wavetable position is moving. You can see the little blue dot. So we've got an envelope moving through the wavetables. There's an example of some visual feedback. But you can also see the wavetable evolving over time in 2D view, which is really cool. It allows you to see what's happening. I just think it's really dope. And then if you click it, you see it in 3D, which is a great way of actually figuring out how wavetables actually are put together. In the sense you have these 256 subtables, and then you can move through those subtables. So it's moving through the different individual subtables, creating this cool sound. Super cool visual feedback, and it stems throughout the entire thing. So, I mean, there's one really cool thing about envelopes I recently discovered. So you can see here, for example, if you have a look at this envelope 2, you can faintly see envelope 1 in the background. So it's super subtle. This is envelope 1. So if you have a look, it's faint gray in the background. So when you're doing multiple envelopes, you can see what the other envelopes are doing at that exact moment in time. Super good. So all these little features, there's so many that just make it a real pleasure to use. And I'll show you one more cool visual feedback thing that isn't too relevant to actually making your sound, but it's quite cool. In all these filters here, so like all passes or choose something a bit more normal, if you actually click, you can see what's happening to the phase of the filter. So you can actually see what the filters are doing in terms of the phase. So pretty cool, pretty weird, and pretty nerdy, pretty techie, but it's quite cool, I thought. It's quite a nice thing that they actually put all that in there. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be a super cool trick and tip that you probably don't know, even if you already use Serum. And it's all about these LFOs. So let's say we have a few nodes in here, like this. I'm sure you've done just the same if you already have Serum. And you've probably figured out you can drag these little dots around to change the curviness, which is pretty cool. You're thinking, yeah, quite nice. But have you ever done this? Hold down the Option key, aka the Alt key if you have Windows. Look at that. They all move at the same time, which may look like some silly little fun thing that isn't that useful. But in fact, I'll tell you why it's super good. If you have some complicated or semi-complicated or even quite a simple modulation set up, and if you're finding that your whole pattern doesn't sound that coherent, so what we could do, for example, is set up this LFO2 to be the main modulation shape for a dubstep wobble or a drum and bass pattern, or so something cool, some sort of main modulation that's moving things around. what you can find if you have lots of modulations, they can sound a bit incoherent, like they're just one modulation and another random modulation, all part of one phrase. But if they all have exactly the same curviness to them, which is the technical scientific term, curviness, if they all have exactly the same curviness, they just sound like one coherent thing. Can't be bothered to give you an example, but super useful little trick, especially if you do the dubstep. Just holding down the Option key or the Alt key as you drag them around. And there's quite a few cool little tips and tricks in terms of holding down shortcuts as you're mucking about with Serum. So it's worth learning them. Definitely worth checking out the manual for that one. I'll show you one more quick little bonus tip just because I'm nice like that. So as this bonus little super quick sneaky tip that wasn't even part of the plan, if we see here we have, whenever we do some sort of modulation with like the LFOs or something, we can see that the modulation either starts at the middle bit of the knob and then goes to the right, or what it sometimes does is it looks like this, where the actual knob position is in the middle and it moves either side. I did a little shortcut there, you didn't see. I held down the Shift key and the Option key and click, and that changes whether or not the actual point on the knob is in the middle or at the side. It's pretty nerdy, pretty obscure, but you'd be surprised how useful that is if you just build it into muscle memory. You can change that with the mod matrix, but why do that when you can learn a little shortcut? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And then for favorite thing number 4, favorite 4, favorite 4, my fourth favorite thing about Serum is kind of a general concept, and it's all about how it's just really quick and easy to get your ideas down, and it's a lot quicker than most other VST synths. Because yes, this does sound amazing as a synth, as a sound generator, but let's be honest, most good synths can make amazing sounds. It's all down to how quickly can you work with it, how quickly can you lay down your ideas, and just how nice is it to use? Is it enjoyable to use? Can you do it quickly? Can you do it efficiently? And this thing ticks all those boxes. It's not only nice and clear what's happening, it's easy to use, but it's really quick to use. It's a lot quicker than everything else. So it's things like how pretty much everything's in this one window. There's not tabs and tabs and tabs and little sub menus. And if you want to do a little bit of modulation, you don't have to spend ages programming it in, you just do it. Whether that's LFO here, for example, you have this rise or delay. So if you have, say, a wobble happening, if you want that wobble to start and come in, so it comes in progressively, instead of setting up something like an internal envelope, which is what you would have to do in Massive, or setting up another envelope and routing that to something, maybe the amplitude of that LFO, which all takes time. Most synths you can do it, but it takes time to set up. But this one, you just go kaplow, and that's it. Simple as that. You just drag up rise, and you didn't even have to navigate to a submenu. You just had an idea, oh, let's have this LFO coming gradually over time. Let's drag it to a position, and kablamo, super quick, super easy. And the same thing applies to whether it's, oh, I'm doing some pitch bend. Oh, I want to change the amount of the pitch bend. I want it to say a whole octave, not just 2 or 7 semitones. So we have this down here, so we can literally just click and drag to 12 or 24, whatever else we need. We don't have to go digging through tabs or trying to figure out, oh, what's going on. It's even right next to the pitch bend wheel. How good is that? The key thing is for this is you get all the controls you want, but all the controls you need are there. You don't have to spend ages digging through things. And I just think that is super nice. It means I can make a preset so much quicker using this than Massive or FMA or whatever else you care to name. Yeah, super rad. Dope. And then finally, as pretty much a final favorite thing, but also somewhat related to the previous one, it's going to be this dedicated sub oscillator, and it sums up Serum perfectly. So a lot of the times whenever you have your sound, I mean, this isn't a prime example here, but normally what happens when you create some sort of fancy wavetable, you can end up losing a lot of the fundamental note because of the way that wavetables work. You end up having more harmonics than fundamental floating around in there. And you can add that back in with a sub oscillator by doing a single click. Click. So instead of setting up a whole separate oscillator and converting it to a sine wave and then maybe pitching it up or down an octave or whatever else you need to do, all the buttons are right there, nice and easy. So for example, if we wanted to add in a sub-bass layer underneath that, instead of having to set up another oscillator, like set up oscillator B, somehow figure out how to make it a sine wave, and then, oh, we need to somehow pitch it down. So instead of doing all that, you just go click, maybe pitch it down a few octaves, because this particular note I'm playing right now does actually have a nice fundamental. But we clicked it down 2 octaves. Remember, the nice thing is because the dedicated sub-oscillator is only giving you the things you need. Pretty rad. And then because it is a dedicated sub oscillator, it's got exactly the controls you want which is great. So it's got things like, instead of having lots of different pitch controls or lots of different unison controls, things you don't need for a sub oscillator, it's purely got pan, which you don't use too often with sub, but you know what, sometimes it's quite fun to play around with that. It's got the level, so for example, we can ease off on it. We can even set up one of our envelopes or LFOs to map to it. So in particular for dubstep wobbles, you'll probably want to also map one of your LFOs or a new LFO to that level as well. And then we have the octave. So yeah, instead of having lots of pitch controls, we literally just click up and down to the respective octave we want. And then we have direct out, which is awesome. It basically bypasses all the filters and effects. So let's say you have some weird effect, it's doing some phasing or reverby type thing. Sometimes you don't want the sub going through all that, so just direct it out. Super useful, super use it all the time. And then we have these here, which basically determine what the type of sub is. So essentially you're determining what harmonics there are. So you've got either just a simple sine or some sort of like rounded off signs to get a few harmonics. So, and then like triangle dude, and then like saws and squares, so you can add in loads of harmonics. Super fun and just exactly what you need. You wouldn't need, for example, loads of wavetables. You purely need to choose one of these main styles. Do we want a clean sub or a sub with a few harmonics, or do we want it quite gritty? Well, not gritty, but harmonically rich. Sums up Serum, I think. It gives you just the controls you want, and you can click them super fast. There's no digging through sub menus. It's just great. And there's lots of visual feedback, and it's obvious what's happening. It's fantastic.